This episode of the Driving Safety Show is sponsored by Drivers Alert, celebrating 30 years of helping companies keep their drivers safe. To learn more, visit driversalert.com. Distracted driving, drunk driving, drowsy driving. You want safer roads, and so do we. You're listening to the Driving Safety Show. Hear insights, in-depth analysis, and expert advice from key players in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors who are leading the way in making our roads safer. Are you ready to join us? And now, your host of the Driving Safety Show, Rich Sordahl.
Welcome to the Driving Safety Show. It's episode number 23. Our guest today is a career pilot, having spent the better part of the last 2 decades with the United Kingdom's Royal Air Force, otherwise known as the RAF. Over the years, his assignments have included C-17 Captain, Deputy Flight Commander, Air Safety Assurance Team Leader, and Flight Commander Assurance Team. Today, he's the multi-engine lead for the RAF Safety Center. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics with honors from the University of Hull and a postgraduate certificate in Human Factors and Safety Assessment Aeronautics from Cranfield University. He is also a vocal advocate for improving road safety, leveraging his knowledge in aviation safety and applying it to driving. His volunteer work includes membership in the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents and the Institute of Advanced Motoring, and serving as advisor for Road Safety Great Britain. Coming to us from the United Kingdom, Michael Kitching. Welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you for being here. You know, Michael, I love, in your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned that you have 2 passions, aviation and people. At what point in your aviation career did you develop a keen interest for safety?
Well, okay, I think I've always had a keen interest, but I didn't know I had a keen interest until about 2011, so maybe 8 years ago. I used to do a lot of work on an aircraft called the C-17, which operated then into and out of Afghanistan and Iraq, mainly Afghanistan. And we had lots of long days, so 24-hour days. My record is a lot longer than that in terms of on an aircraft. And I recognized then there was an issue with tiredness. People call it fatigue. Fatigue is a physiological state. We're talking about tiredness. And indeed, with the hours we did, fatigue as well, in terms of long-term fatigue issues. So I recognized an issue there. So I purchased and procured some sort of mattresses to go onto the aircraft, like self-inflating mattresses. And I used to build sort of like beds for my crew. And so I was managing risk, which I'll come on to later in this show. As a captain of an aircraft commander, I managed risk for my crew in terms of tiredness. And I didn't realize at the time I was actually managing safety risk. I just saw it as managing people and looking after their physiological and mental state in terms of making sure that when we did land in Afghanistan and indeed back in the UK, that we were looking after the passengers in a way that we could land safely. So I was managing risk then. I was managing safety. But a lot earlier in my career, and indeed, before I was even in the Air Force, I was managing risk then, and I never realized at the time that a lot of what we do in daily life is actually just managing risks, whether it's financial risk, reputational risk, life risks, but safety risks, hazards, perception, cognitive behaviors. But as an example, and my wife will kill me for this, but the day before my wings check, so when you finally get your wings in the military, is you do a final handling test. So this was 4 years, 3.5 years in the making, maybe 4 years. You do your final check, and I did my brief. I did my out brief. I went to the bottom of the list of questions, which talks about the weather. It talks about notice to airmen. It talks about risks, and then at the bottom it talks about, are you fit to fly? And the instructor, who is the boss of the squadron, asked the question, are you fit to fly? And I said no. I then got told off, went to his office, and he said, what's wrong, Kitch? I said, my wife's pregnant. She told me last night. So my wife told me the night before my final handling check that she was pregnant with my firstborn, my son, who's now 12. And I said, I'm not fit to fly on my last ever trip before my frontline duties. So I managed that risk really well. I didn't fly then. I then did my check a week later and passed. So I got my wings, my Air Force, Royal Air Force wings. So I was managing risk and early on in my career as a flying officer. And then I've just done it ever since. But I never really formally did it until 2013 when I joined our air mobility group called 2 Group, where we manage lots of different aircraft types. And I learned a lot about safety risks there. Answers that question. Sorry.
Now, and
Yeah.
you've been working with European Union Aviation Safety Agency, and I see this recurring topic of flight data monitoring. Maybe you could help us understand what that means and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I was late to this interview today was because EASA and indeed the UK Civilian Aviation Authority have been doing flight data monitoring for a long time. Now, what is flight data monitoring? Is the question you're asking, I suppose. Aircraft have data, and they come through the flight data recorder, and it's acquired via an acquisition unit. The data then gets transferred, transposed to a flight data recorder, which, if you think about the crash box, the black box, that's the same thing. It's crash protected to lots of G in terms of acceleration, to lots of degrees of temperature. And in a case of an accident, it's analyzed to find out why something went wrong. Well, I talked to you before the show about doing things and looking at things that, why not analyze that data on a daily basis or weekly basis for all aircraft types and find out what else we don't know? So the emerging hazards, the operations, everyday activity. It's exactly the same as telematics on a vehicle, but more complex, more parameters, more data, more information. And therefore, you can analyze hazards and risks on aircraft types and flying operations. And you can look at things like maintenance activity, operations, safety, and then training. So training feedback. Now, we do a similar thing with telematics in the world, but we don't use that data in any sort of analytical or intelligent way, do we? We just tell people off for driving 75 miles an hour in a 70 instead of understanding why they got there. We don't look at the way people turn corners when it's snowing at 50 miles an hour instead of 30. We don't look at traffic densities using telematics. So it's using data from aircraft, which is a formalized part of the aircraft, to intelligently look at what we're doing every day. So that's it's been around for about 50 years, and we're starting to do it in away from our normal business. So yeah, it's quite exciting. We did a conference a few days ago with 150 people from around the world, 11 speakers. I was fortunate and humble enough to be one of them. There are a few of us organised it, and you'll see some videos on YouTube interfrastically to quickly in the next few days, hopefully. It'll be the first ever videos on YouTube for this subject. So that's quite exciting. And it's one tiny project, but it has a big impact potentially on money savings, finance, but more importantly, the safety aspects and the business operational outcomes about how we do our business. So yeah, that's flight data monitoring. Not my favourite subject at the moment, because I've done a lot of work for 5 years on this subject, and I feel a little bit tired. So I still love it, but I've got other projects like road safety and charities and the like that I want to crack on with. Distraction, cognitive distraction, things linked to this subject of road safety. Because if I'm being honest, most of our people, both civilian and military, are dying in their cars. And they're not actually; they're dying on their motorbikes and walking the street and on their cycles, on their bikes and motorbikes. So there's a lot of work to do in that area, which I think is why we're talking today.
And exactly, yeah. A good transition. So Michael, as we're trying to establish this this connection between aviation safety and road safety, what are some of the common principles between the two, and what got you started or interested in volunteering to improve road safety?
This is quite an easy one for me to explain. So back in 2016, in September, end of September, beginning of October 2016, I had a severe near miss with somebody walking down the street. So in the UK, if you've ever been driven around the UK, there were lots of dark roads which are narrow but have high speed limits. So 60 miles an hour, enough for 2 cars, and that is a 60-mile-an-hour limit. And there's a road that goes between a place where I was doing my simulator training all the way back to RAF Royal Air Force Prize, not where I used to fly from. And as I'm driving down this road, I was doing just about 50 miles an hour. It was dark, my lights are on, and I almost hit somebody who was walking in the middle of the road. He didn't have any lights on. This is a person walking down the middle of the road. He didn't have any high-vis jackets on or anything, no torch, no lights. I just missed him, and I was lucky not to hit him. And I stopped my car. It was a military vehicle. I'm not allowed to do this, so I'll probably get told off for saying this, but I put him in my car. I had a go at him, and he was foreign. And he actually, so I drove him along the road. I found out what he did, and he was a chef in the local pub. And he'd walked from a town about 4 miles away, and he walked to work every day, every night, to be a chef. No, so I dropped him off at the pub, which was just down the road. I gave him my high-vis belt to keep forever. I went into the pub and told the manager off for not protecting his people in terms of duty of care, and then I drove my vehicle. And I was in a bit of sort of a moment of shock. I almost killed somebody. I didn't. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't tired. But if I had have been, I would have absolutely killed him. No doubt in my mind. I missed him by about 2 inches. So 2 inches is about this big. And so 2 inches is, 5 centimeters in your language, probably. And I would have killed him, no doubt, and probably would have flipped the car and killed myself because I would have overreacted, like people do, don't they? They overreact. Now, luckily, I didn't overreact. I gently hold the steering wheel and just moved it slightly and just missed him. I would have probably died that day as well. So that changed my life. I then started thinking about distraction for tiredness and about how we can mitigate that professionally. And this is what we're going to talk about in a bit later. What I did about that.
In the United Kingdom, when someone gets a driver's license for the first time, the laws and the rules, they're all handled at the country level, correct?
Correct. Yes. So unlike the United States, where there are different states with different laws, 50 different states still, isn't it? I think with lots of different laws. There's just UK law when it comes to driving. And yes, so it's not a tiered system, but there are differences in what vehicles you can drive as per any country should have, I would expect. Used to be that in the old days, you had like a debit card license and a paper version. The paper version is now gone, and you have a layered system on your debit card license, which tells you which vehicles you can and can't drive. And then you have to do extra tests to drive bigger vehicles, larger vehicles. But there are options for advanced training early on, and even children can drive cars now. So one of the options for my son's birthday next year, you can't tell him, is to let him go and practice driving a car. He had a choice in April to either get things, play golf, and be a member of a club, learn to drive a car, learn to fly an aircraft. He went for the golf. In fact, I'm looking outside right now. It looks like I'm looking at you, but I'm looking outside, and I can see my son's golf net in my lovely garden. So yeah, he's very good. He's better than I am. He's such an annoying little boy, but I love him to bits. So yeah, it's really about managing the licenses and making sure people are actually fit to drive. The problem is they never get tested ever again. Ever. There's no assurance. There's no auditing. They can have that license for 30 years and they never get tested ever again for eyesight, for anything, which is a problem in the UK right now.
What is the driving culture like in the UK? Maybe help us understand. is a car kind of a rite of passage to many, or if you're living in the city, you have to, use mass transportation, or is it necessary to have a car in general?
It's not necessary. There is only one city really where they have massive restrictions on vehicle driving, and that's London, because they charge extra money to drive there, quite a lot of extra money actually. Lots of bigger cities have incentives by doing you effectively drive your car to a bus station, to a massive car park. It's called park and ride. And then you jump on a bus, and the bus takes you into the middle of the town. For example, Oxford, quite a famous city, has a park and ride. Swindon, not so famous, but that has a park and ride. Hull, where I'm from, sorry for everyone, I'm from Hull. That has a park and ride. And so therefore the councils, so we call them councils, the local council has an ability to try and reduce the amount of vehicles in the city centres. Most people have a vehicle. If you've ever been to the UK, you really need a car or some sort of mode of transportation, because otherwise you couldn't get anywhere unless you like live in your local village. But we like to travel a lot. In terms of culture, which is your first part of your question, it's more behaviour. So people use the word culture a lot. I think it's behaviours. And people do what they do when they're not being watched. That's really important. How many, hands up if you've ever sped a car over 70 miles an hour in a 70. My hand's going up. Hands up if you've ever, I'll be honest, I'm being honest. Hands up if I've ever touched my mobile phone when I've been driving a vehicle with the engine. Why? Because I was standstill on the M25 for an hour, and there's people walking around their vehicles. There was nothing moving. There was no risk because my engine was on, but my parking brake was on. So I took my phone out. Well, that's okay. That's managing risk. Do I use it now when I'm driving? No. Do I use hands-free? Yes, but not as much as I used to do. Do I manage the risk? Yes, I do. What's my behaviour? Well, I don't speed, but have I done 76 in the last 2 weeks in a 70? Yes. Down a hill, I didn't even know because I was looking out the window. It was raining and the speed got away from me, but I managed it. I was nowhere near the car in front. I was more than 2 seconds away. So it's very difficult to control speed when you have the car that I have. It's a Nissan Almera Tino 2004, and the radio doesn't work, but it's a safe car. So I manage the risk, and it can't even go above 80 miles an hour because it's not fast enough. People drive differently when they're not being watched, which is why telematics, integrated systems in vehicles, dash cams are really important, and we don't have them yet in the UK like you guys have, girls and guys. Speed cameras, I'll talk about a bit later probably. But yeah, we have systems where we can reduce the likelihood people are driving so fast. But speed is an escalating factor. It's not the only thing. There's other things we can focus on apart from the obsession with speed. So again, I'll talk about that a bit later, I think.
What about the issue of distracted driving? We see it in the news pretty much every day here in the United States. Are you finding it an issue as well in the UK?
It's a huge issue. I could say some funny stories from the last few weeks. So let's call it cognitive distraction. Can we do that? Because, and let's not talk about driving. Let's talk about distraction, cognitive distraction, just in its own right, because we get distracted with everything. So you're distracted at work, you're distracted from life, you're distracted with stress, you're distracted with money problems, you're distracted because your wife's not very well. So we have distractions in life. Everything we do is a distraction. Sometimes it's a good distraction, i.e. this interview. So we during driving though, it's really important that people understand there's more than one type of distraction. There's internal distractions in your own brain, life, financial worries, stress, arguments with loved ones. That's internal stresses, internal stressors, internal cognitive distraction. But then there's the external bit. So I'll come to mobile phones last because there's an obsession with that. It's myopia. There's distractions outside the vehicle. There's distractions in the vehicle, sat navigation, indication systems, unfamiliarity with the vehicle, windscreen wipers, distractions outside in terms of signage and road markings that aren't quite correct, and everything in between. That everyone focuses on now is the use of mobile phones. But a mobile phone is not a mobile phone, it's a computer. A mobile phone is a computer. And we've allowed, I say we in the generic sense, the governments, the the car operations people, so OEMs as we call them, the manufacturers, the councils have allowed a computer to be put into a cockpit. I'll call it a cockpit because I can integrate it and compare it with aviation. They've allowed systems to be integrated by a computer into a vehicle cockpit without any test and evaluation, without any analysis of ergonomics or how they work together, integrated systems. We wouldn't allow that. Well, we're not supposed to allow that in an aircraft. It would be tested, evaluated properly, appropriately by test pilots. In a vehicle, we can plug in a USB, which again has some fire issues. I'll talk about that another day, lithium battery fires. We can plug it into the computer, use the sat-nav, and then talk to it via Siri. We can use sat-nav. We can integrate a phone, computer phone, into a system. And the one thing we don't use it for is a phone. We don't use it as a phone very rarely. We speak to people. It's a huge, huge, high-level cognitive distraction because it's a high-level function to use a computer. And therefore, if you're using your phone and you're driving your vehicle at the same time, if you're using your phone, you are simply not driving. You're not looking. You're looking at the phone. If you had your phone in front of you now, Rich, and you have your notifications on, I guarantee you 100% you will look at your phone if it goes off right now, because I would. Human nature. My phone is sat next to me right here. I don't get any notifications whatsoever. There's how I manage my distraction. So look, I've got no notifications, none. And I've probably got 300 emails, 20 messages, 15 WhatsApps, and everything else in between. But I only look when I need to look. So there's a way of mitigating it. And there are applications there that can go on this phone and stop you using it, or at least tell somebody, maybe a business manager, that you're using your phone. And that's some of the work that's ongoing in the background with various companies in the UK and around the world to try and mitigate this risk associated with distraction. But phone is an obsession. It's become the biggest thing. And the funny story is, I was driving in my Audi A4 estate. It's 2007, so it's not a new car, but it's nice. It's a nice black car. I'm in a suit and a pair of sunglasses, a really nice pair of sunglasses. And I pull up next to a lorry, and all this guy can see is a guy with like Men in Black with like a ninja with sunglasses on and a suit, and he's using his phone. I shout, "Put your phone down!" And he dropped his phone. And then he just looked forward, and he looked at me going, "Never again." So, and he didn't. He lost. He must have lost his phone somewhere underneath him. But it's obsession. So people touch their phone when they're driving, and the truth is, not everyone's doing it, but pretty much everyone. That's the truth. And industry needs to accept some responsibility and accountability, as does the governments, as do the manufacturers. But then we're not trained to use our computers in a vehicle. Same as we're not trained properly to use sat-nav. We shouldn't be using it when we're driving. I use sat-nav very, very rarely. I do a bit of research, route study. I have a map in my car, and then I just go, and then if I get lost, I ask questions. I pull over, go to the local pub, have a soft drink, and then ask a question about where I go next, and then continue. It's an obsession, and we've gone too far beyond without integrating technology. So that's a mistake, and it's dangerous. And we'll see what happens in the near future in terms of regulation. But yeah.
Yeah, the topic of distraction is interesting, especially in this particular case, because you being a career pilot, being in a cockpit of an airplane, there's obviously lots of things to monitor and things that they're constantly vying for your attention. So how going back to the the concept of aviation, how does a pilot manage all of that information to keep that plane going on its, intended course?
So there's one simple answer: education and training. Constant training over many years. I mean, I started flying in 2001, so it's not that long ago. I flew a very small aircraft to start off with. I was not the best pilot in the world, but I'm a quick learner. I did it during university, so I was doing a mathematics degree at the same time as a formal elementary flying training course. I passed the course. I did quite well in my degree, but I passed the flying course. And you have to learn. So there's lots of checks. There's lots of route study. There's lots of learning and education, and it's constant. So that first aircraft, you have to know the checklist inside out, verbatim, every single word in the whole of the checklist. And then as you move on to bigger and bigger aircraft, you start integrating systems of people. So you have a co-pilot, you have a loadmaster, you have an engineer who's down the back who might be able to help. But in terms of cockpits, on my last aircraft, the C-17 Globemaster, which is an American aircraft, it was McDonnell Douglas, now Boeing, you have a three-man flight deck, or three-man women flight deck. You have a pilot, or aircraft commander, a co-pilot, and then a loadmaster. So it's a communication system, but it's a system of systems, and you learn lots and lots of information, and you sit in for example, before landing checklist, you're coming to land, so you come into land and you need to know the checklist. I can still quote the checklist off by heart. That's not clever. That's not cocky. That's just, I spent probably 50 hours of my life in a bath practicing that over and over and over. So it no longer became a high-level function. It became the same as chewing gum. It became something I could do without thinking, like driving a car. You learn all these things one by one, so you can do multiple high-level function activities at once, if and only if you've learned the way to make them high-level functions, normal functions, like chewing gum or walking. So slats extend, flaps on half, gear down before landing checklist. I learned that 13 years ago. And I've never revised it since. It's just there. So that is the checklist, And then you learn that, and then it becomes a lot easier. So there's lots of systems on an aircraft. It looks complicated, complex. It is, but most of them systems above the cockpit, above the pilot, is just for ease of access. So they're all circuit breakers, really. They're just switches that you need to switch on at some point. You might as well have them above you, because then you want to turn them on or off. And some of them are air conditioning or passenger lights, or simple things like lights or hydraulic systems press. Well, you need access to them. Most aircraft now have them in the computer. It's just that you need access to all the systems. Yeah, so it is complex. It's a lot harder than driving, but it's the same function.
I've heard a lot, especially in the last year or so, about the topic of rethinking, the way transportation is designed in cities, trying to make more room for, bicycles, pedestrians, just general mobility rethinking. Are you seeing some of that being implemented now in the UK?
Yeah, I think there's a lot being done in the UK in terms of pedestrianising the city centres. The new generation coming through are really gifted and talented, and they have a massive view on the world in terms of resources. But it's not just the new generation. There are people my age as well and older who have been here before, and we have the same view. We just have a lot of experience in terms of the way we express it. So we might not be as aggressive in terms of the way we say it, but we still have the same thinking. We've just found a different way of expressing it. So we do quite a lot of work in that area, but it's still not enough. We're still burning fossil fuels. We're still polluting the atmosphere, and electric vehicles are not the answer. I'm sorry for the people that drive them, but because we're still burning fossil fuels to create electricity. Nikola Tesla created a system a long time ago that was free electricity. Not free as an infinite, but free. So there are things like Hyperloop coming through, which is or isn't going to happen. You've got things like self-driving vehicles, which aren't going to happen, but something's going to change. It's the industrial revolution is coming next in terms of the future. We just don't know what it's going to look like. Well, when you do the research, you do know what it's going to look like. It's going to be integrated systems of drones, flying day and night in all weathers, but not yet because it's not ready. There'll be lots more things on the ground. There'll be lots more things underground in terms of high-speed transportation systems, lots more automated vehicles. We just need to accept that that's coming and then just try and make it as safe as practicable. You get in I'll say an elevator, because I think you call it an elevator. I call it a lift. Is that not a vehicle? It goes up and down. What about the ULR at Heathrow? That's automated. There's no driver. Everyone gets on that and accepts it. There's no difference. It's just about integrating it with modern technology and making sure that it is safe as practicable. Elon Musk and the like, very, very clever guy. And he doesn't just talk, he's not just an academic, he actually delivers it as well. It'd be interesting to meet him just for 5 minutes, just to see how he operates. Because when you link what he does together, they're all part of the same topic. And it's just about integrating systems and making them safe.
Michael, you mentioned briefly speed cameras. Are they being used in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, so I have to be careful what I say here because my view on this is different to most people I've ever met. I think speed is an obsession. Could be careful what I say. Should it not be safe speed? So 60 miles an hour in the 60 mile an hour zone is not safe if it's raining. It's not safe if there's lots of vehicles. It's not safe if there's lots of standing water. It's probably more like 30 miles an hour. Now, 70 miles an hour at night or in day in the middle of a motorway on the left-hand lane when there's no other cars around is safe, but so is 80. So is 90. Now, I don't drive to 90. My car can't get there. But in the terms of safety management systems, speed is something called an escalating factor. It just makes the outcome, the severity worse. The actual likelihood it might change as well, but it's not the thing that kills people. It's not the thing that hurts people. So speed does not kill people. I'm sorry if people don't agree. This is my humble opinion. It's people kill people who drive dangerously from distraction, from tiredness, from not driving their vehicle correctly, from not going to the doctors when they can't see properly, and being honest with themselves when they're not fit to drive. That's the sort of thing we're talking about when they're distracted from mental health, or they've got having an argument with their wife, or they're looking at their child as they're driving. That's distraction. That's the thing that's the first step of the outcome of accident. It's not speed. If you fall asleep at the wheel and you're driving at 70 miles an hour and you hit somebody, you're going to kill them, whether it's 70, 60, 50. But if you're falling to sleep, you never even start braking because you're asleep. If you're distracted, you never even use the brake because you're distracted, you're asleep. So it's 1 or 0. You either are asleep or aren't. There's no half sleep, by the way. You either are distracted or you aren't. And your body can't do both. So your brain cannot look outside and then look at the phone at the same time. It could do one or the other. And you see that in all the videos that are really clever. And so speed is a thing, but it's not the only thing. There's lots of other ways of mitigating the risk to life of driving dangerously and accidents and incidents and near misses as well. Vehicles, it costs so much money to in terms of damage to vehicles every day on the roads because people are not driving appropriately to the conditions. Speed. Sorry.
There's another aspect of speed too that I find fascinating, and it has controversial. There's polarized discussion about it, and it's the concept of speed differential. And I find personally speed differential to be extremely dangerous if the traffic flow is not all traveling at the same speed, and you have to come around a corner and somebody's going 20 or 30 miles below the speed limit. I mean, that to me seems to be incredibly dangerous, and speed differential just doesn't seem to be talked about enough.
It's not, and again, this is what's taught on the advanced courses, so Institute of Advanced Motoring. So I often drive my vehicle or another vehicle, and people saying, well, you accelerated really aggressively there. Yes, because I need to get to 70 miles an hour as quick as possible, practicable, depending on the conditions, so they can integrate with the traffic. If I don't get to 70 miles an hour, I'm not going to be able to just gently, smoothly come in between. Or if I get to the level of the vehicle, I'll put my hands so you can see them, and then I can slow down, go behind, or speed up and go ahead. So I need to get to about 60 to 65 miles an hour and give myself choices. I've still got the option to brake and stop at the end and then take 20 minutes to get onto the motorway. But speed differential is a killer, absolute killer. People driving on the middle lane in the UK, you can't undertake. You're not allowed to, unlike America. There's no undertaking. You're on the left-hand lane, or you're overtaking. There is no lanes in the same way. There are some times when there are, but mostly it's not the same as America. People don't stay in the same lane; they move over to the left, and that's just differences. If people in the UK are in the middle lane driving at 50 miles an hour, they're going to cause an accident. They already have many, many times. And they'll argue, well, I was only doing 50. Yeah, but there's people behind you doing 70. They then had to pull out in front of another car. They didn't see you because you were driving slowly and you were small in the vision of view, so looking straight ahead. You've got a car in front, you assume they're doing somewhere near the speed limit because it's a clear road, and then they come up on you really quickly. You have to brake aggressively for the car behind who aren't expecting it, who are probably distracted with their child behind them in the seat. Or you have to overtake, and then you endanger the person on the outside lane who's probably doing 100, and in their Audi or their BMW. No disrespect to Audi or BMW. It's just they're the two of the cars I thought of in my head, maybe a Porsche as well, just to balance it. So it is, differential speed is massively important, and we don't get taught the differences, and that's not right. It's not right. It's not safe.
What about how police, traffic police in the UK handle violations? Is there any leniency, or is it very strict when there's a traffic law violation?
This is one of the problems. Again, I've worked with the police quite a bit in the last few years, especially the Met Police and the police up towards Birmingham, and they have a difficult job. They don't have the people to enforce traffic violations. We have traffic cops, traffic police officers, but the problem is, what speed is illegal? So 70 mile an hour. So my question of you is 71 miles an hour illegal or not? 71 in a 70. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly here it wouldn't. I mean, most cases, if 70 is the speed limit, you would not probably be pulled over until you were traveling 80 or 85. Great.
Okay, so that's fine. So at 71 miles an hour, you are breaking the law, which doesn't feel right, does it? Because your actual indicator is not, the tolerance isn't within plus or minus 5 anyway. So they normally give, and this is not mandated, it's just this guidance to the police and the local councils, the local constabularies, to allow circa around 10% plus 2 miles an hour. So in a 70, that would be 79 before they do anything. But they don't have to. They can, or 30 would be 35 miles an hour. So 10% plus 2. But that's not written down. That's just guidance. If you're doing 33 and a 30, they can pull you over and they can do you for speeding. And the speed cameras are set exactly at 10% plus 2, I believe. Don't quote me on that, because I've been done once a long time ago, doing 46 and a 40, and I had to pay, I think, £60 fine, and I got 3 points on my license. I didn't have a choice. I just had that. And I was slowing down in a dual carriageway. There was no cars around me, and I must have been doing 46 down through the dual carriageway sign, and there was a police car there. So I got done. I didn't have it wasn't unsafe, but then I was still speeding at the point of 40 miles an hour for maybe 3 seconds. And sometimes we just we go over the speed limit, but the police don't have the capacity or the numbers to be able to enforce this and then do the mobile phone thing as well, because they've trying to enforce speed, but then they're now trying to enforce use of mobile phones. So how many people do we need for that? And there aren't enough people, and there's the issue.
And it also seems too, if I'm remembering correctly, that maybe this is all of Europe, but I was thinking it was the UK, that there is a push to have, is it 20 miles an hour, where any congested or very urbanized area, that becomes the official speed limit. They're trying to drop that speed and lower it because I guess the statistics show, of course, the likelihood of fatality changes significantly when you drop from 30 to 20, let's say. Is that going on in the UK now?
It has been for many years. So there were lots of, especially around schools, there were lots of 20-mile-an-hour zones around schools, which mostly gets ignored by the parents, which is fascinating. But that's just behaviours again. It's not culture. It's behaviours. They're rushing to get to work, so they're trying to drop their children off. They do back roads. Yes, 30 to 20 is clearly safer, as is 20 to 10, as is 10 to 5, as is 5 to 0. No, it's an exponential curve, effectively, isn't it? So we know that it's safer to drive at 20, but then what we're doing is encouraging people to then drive faster when it's a faster speed limit. So we've got to be very careful of assurance. We talked about assurance before the start. Change management. Beware of the unintended consequences of your actions, because if you make everywhere 10 miles an hour, they're going to be so angry, they're going to drive at 60 and 40 to make up lost time. You've got to be very careful about restricting speed limits without understanding what you're trying to do. If you drive 30 miles an hour in a congested area, you're not going to get to 30 because it's congested at school time. So actually, the traffic's so busy anyway, you won't even get to that miles an hour. The issue is people need to drive safely at whatever speed they need to drive in the conditions they're in. And people don't think that way all the time. They just see it as 30 miles an hour as a limit. And they get there and think that I'm driving at 30, but nobody drives at the limit. I try to all the time, and that's not just me. Lots of people do. Most people drive above the speed limit. So there's no harm in bringing the speed limit to 20, but we need to accept that people are going to still drive at 30. But they won't drive at 35 because then it'll get done. So it's quite a clever move. But it's only when it's required, so only during the moments of high risk exposure, i.e. when there's lots of people there, or there's an event on, or there's a school fete, or the school's open. So it has to be a system that's like a manageable, like a smart system, like a smart motorway. So you can have that in an urban environment. We have the technology, and therefore we can put some things in cars that tell you when you reach that speed limit. I have it on my mobile phone. There's an app called, I won't mention the app's name because that's not fair, but there's an app that tells me when I hit the speed limit. It just goes beep. I hit the speed limit, beep, and then I know I take my foot off the accelerator, and then I look down at my speed, only then, and then I look back up again. And if I slow down and speed up again, it goes beep. Well, that's a really clever system. It's just a very famous app, which isn't Google. It might be linked to them, and it just tells me, and I can change that setting to be 10% above the speed limit. So I know I've gone 10% above, and then I can slow down. So there's a way of managing speed. That's an integrated system. I've learned how to use this, and I know I'm listening for the sound, and therefore I can control my speed without looking at the instrument. I'm looking out the window where my eye should always be. Not talk to my wife or my child. I'm then looking out the window and managing risk, dynamic risk all the time. That's the difference.
Now, Michael, you're involved in quite a bit of volunteer work with respect to road safety, and I wanted to get into three of these organizations that you have been affiliated with now for a while. The first one, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, that one was founded in 1916, and their tagline says, "Accidents don't have to happen." What is kind of the mission for the Royal Society?
Yeah, it's a fascinating line, isn't it? So yeah, as you say, it was 1916, I think, wasn't it? So it's just over 100 years old. It's fascinating that they talk about being accident-free. I find that quite amusing because unless we don't drive anymore, or we don't take any risks, or if we terminate all risks, we'll never have accident. If we sit in our chairs and never move, there are other risks we can start to manage, but we won't be accident-free because the human's always in the loop, even in self-driving vehicles. Humans design the software. So in a human-based safety system, there will always be accidents. So it's a great mission, accident-free, but it's unachievable in the real world, in reality. In an ideal world of totalitarianism, dystopia, it would be accident-free. But in the real world, that will never happen. But it's like a 10th dan in karate. You'll never get there. The enlightenment bit, you're going to get to the end of the rainbow. You never reach the end of the rainbow with the pot of gold. You never get there, but you should always aim for it. So why not aim for that? And then the process of trying to get there will always be better than not trying. So do or don't do. There is no try, Yoda. No, hit me or hit me. No, stop trying to hit me and hit me. The Matrix, Neo versus to the guy. So you should always go for it, and then believe, and then you'll be absolutely fine. So their mission, and it's not just cars. Remember that they do lots of different accident things. And if you look at their website, and it's quite fascinating to see how much they actually do. And because it's a royal society, it's quite well renowned throughout the world. So yeah, it's a good charity, good functions, and good training as well. Good training.
And what is the nature of work that you do with the Royal Society?
So not as much as the other ones, but it's more of I've done the course in terms of road safety training, advanced training. It's one of many charities that I'm involved with, and it's more to do with just exposure in terms of if you've done that course, then you have the longevity and the trying to think of the word. Sorry, my brain goes dead sometimes. The justifications talk to you now is because I've done lots of work with these sorts of charities and done the courses and been exposed to what they teach differently. And they teach very similarly the road techniques that the Institute of Advanced Motoring teach. So they're both very similar courses. And therefore, I can be assured that they teach the same things because they do. And that's quite nice to see that you've got two really good organizations that teach very similar techniques, including reversing, Rich. Yeah. Sorry, there's an in-joke there for everyone. We discussed for a very long time, for about an hour before we started this, about other things. I had a bit of a laugh.
Let's jump into that one. The Institute of Advanced Motoring, founded in 1956. According to the website, it's the UK's largest independent road safety charity.
Oh, seriously, they're amazing. I can't explain it any other way. So for not that much money, you can drive your own vehicle to people in the local area who are advanced drivers, and they teach you how to drive better. I'm not joking. I'm such a better driver because of what one of my friends taught me 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, drive my Nissan Almera Tino to a higher standard, genuinely. And they teach lots of roadcraft, and it's just really, really powerful what you learn about yourself in terms of the way you don't manage hazards and look for change, and how far ahead these teachers look. Just proves to yourself that actually you could almost have no accident as long as there's not acts of God. You can predict what's coming way before it happens if you're always looking. But that's where distraction comes in, and tiredness. if you're not distracted, you're not tired, and you're managing risk dynamically, and you're looking for hazard perception, which is what they teach to a very, very high standard, then you won't have an accident. If you do, it's somebody else hitting you with that you didn't see. And even then, they teach that you should have seen that coming, because you should have seen it coming, or you should have looked, unless it's acts of God, like vehicles dropping out of the sky or meteorites, and you're doing okay.
And then, Michael, the final one is Road Safety Great Britain. What is your work with that organization?
So I've really just started with them. It's Road Safety Great Britain Academy, and they're a training academy. So there's work to do there, but they have some fantastic training courses, and it's just trying to understand how. Bear in mind, this is nothing to do with the military. This is to do with the UK. They have some fantastic training courses to train the trainers. And that's the key bit. It's education and training. That's one part of promotion in terms of safety management systems. Education, training. And if you can train people and educate them to understand the principles of safety management systems and risk management without talking about safety, just make it interesting, make it something different. I've got a VR headset which is in High Wycombe right now, and I didn't have time to pick it up today. And I have a whole series of training packages associated with that VR headset. Instead of talking about this and writing it on a magazine or a poster, let's give them a VR headset to use. It's phenomenal training value. People are interested in technology. You give them a video to watch that's okay. People have already turned this off because I'm pretty boring to listen to. But a VR headset, wow, the kids will love that. You take it into a school, you maybe take 5 of them with you, the kids all get a go, and they'll learn now when they're 10, 8, 5, 15 about safety, road safety. But you've got to make it interesting. You've got to make it sexy. Otherwise, it's just another bit of safety. So I try not to use the word safety very often. It's about managing risks and understanding what people need to do in terms of behaviours and decision making. So there's other ways of educating people rather than posters and campaigns and videos, and it doesn't always work. There are different ways, and that's what we need to do, something different, because people are not listening. And they switch off, and so you need to try and do something controversial, something different, something new, something sexy, and that's what VR headsets will do as one piece of technology.
Michael, we're coming up on a lot of time here. What's next for you? Or is there any other projects or things that you'd like to talk about that you're working on, or things that are coming up?
I would love to take this opportunity. And I really thank you for this, Rich, because it's so close to my heart. So my wife's probably listening from afar. My son will be, because he's a ninja and he's got the super hearing. Lymphatic Education and Research Network. So lymphatic system in your body is just like the blood system in your body. And lots of people, about between 140 million and 250 million worldwide, have an issue with their lymphatic system. So if you see lots of big people in America or in the UK who you just think you've had one too many McDonald's, they haven't, I promise you. So my mother-in-law, Sue, she had this from birth because she had lymph nodes taken from her ankles and her wrists under surgery, and she was always a bigger character. But she ate healthy her whole life. I knew her for 17 and a half years, and she was the healthiest person I knew in terms of eating habits. But she was a big girl, and she unfortunately, we lost her a few years ago. And I didn't do enough. I did a lot. I just didn't do enough. Now, I found out about 5 or 6 weeks ago, about 2 months ago now, that my mum also has it. My mum, Pauline. My mother-in-law was called Sue. So I decided to do something about it. And in typical fashion, I decided not just to do some charity work, but to take it as far as I could ever take it. So I contacted effectively the CEO of the Lymphatic Education and Research Network in America. And you have loads of chapters in America. We have one in Europe, in Switzerland. And it's run by a guy called Ipa, who's a doctor. We don't have any in the UK, but we do have some charities to do with this. I decided to try and lead a UK chapter, and I've just released the European chapter page, and the picture of my mother-in-law Sue, I've just checked about 20 minutes ago, is currently at 421 likes and 15 shares in 4 days, which is humbling like nobody would ever imagine. So a shout out to everyone out there who's got lymphedema or some sort of lymphatic disease. We're coming. We're going to help you. Please let us help you. So that is the most important thing in my life right now, apart from my own family. But this is my mother who has this issue, and we need to do something about this. So yeah, there's a massive shout out. I'm going to New York on Saturday next week to watch a 24-hour play with Kathy Bates, who has lymphedema, and we're meeting some stars, and she's a massive advocate. So there's some really special work going on at the moment, trying to get people to engage worldwide in this charity. So that's my number one priority. Is one of them. It's a small part of my life, and just work ethic and trying to do hard work and make a difference in the world. And that's what I'm trying to do with my friends, family.
Well, Michael, we certainly commend you for that. That's great to hear. It's always wonderful to hear people who are out there, so many unsung heroes who are working hard, tirelessly, for numerous causes, trying to make a difference. So I definitely salute you.
I'm certainly not a hero, my friend. I'm just trying to do the best I can do with this brain and this semi-fat body. So I'm getting fitter though. So I'm trying hard. Yeah.
Well, we'll include the website addresses to the 3 road safety organizations that you're currently working with.
Sure.
Beyond this, is there any other kind of contact information you'd like to provide if people want to keep up to date on what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, which I can provide clearly. I do have my own business as well, but I wouldn't talk about that here. It's not appropriate. This is about safety. It's not about business. So my last thing to say, one of my last things is the word safety and advice. And my mantra is you should never pay for safety advice. You should never pay for safety advice. If you want to do work in terms of like reports and actual workload, then yes, people should charge, but we should never pay for safety advice. We're supposed to be working together. So this isn't just about road safety. It's about all safety principles. We should never pay for advice. We need to collaborate and work together. And this is what my business does in the background. And I won't talk about the specifics, but it's a network of ideas, and I'm hoping it's going to do something special. It's early days, but we'll see. Yeah, it's quite a unique business idea. It's about time and working together. So yeah, never pay for safety advice. That's my final words, I think.
Michael, it's been a great pleasure. I certainly appreciate you coming on here and talking about the work that you're doing. Once again, that was Michael Kitching, RAF pilot, aviation safety professional, and one of the preeminent advocates for road safety in the UK. Please share this podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers, and help us educate the public about critical driving safety issues. 40,000 people die on America's roads every year, 1.3 million worldwide. That's just unacceptable. Until next time, please drive safely.
You've been listening to the Driving Safety Show. To stay up to date on the latest episodes, visit driversalert.com/driving-safety-podcast. There you can sign up for episode notifications, listen to past episodes, and even request to be a guest on the show. And don't forget, the Driving Safety Show is the show that features the movers and shakers who are working hard to make our roads safer. See you next time.